Hello, I'm Rebecca Larson. I am the host of the Tutors Dynasty podcast and the owner of tutorsdynasty.com. And today I am here to talk to you about my favorite Tudor figure, Sir Thomas Seymour. Now, I tried to get this started a little while ago, but unfortunately we weren't getting good sound, so I had to restart this video. I'm hoping to get some participation from people who might be interested in learning some more about Thomas. Now, I do see I have one person watching right now. Whoever you are, can you let me know if you can hear me? I was having audio issues earlier. Hey guys, why don't you go ahead and type in and say hi so I know who's here and so I know if you can hear me. Okay, while I'm waiting, I'm hoping you can hear me. I'm going to write in here. Okay. Hi, Kelly Zucker is here. Hi, Kelly. Hi, Shirley. Are you guys ready to hear about some Thomas Seymour? I was just getting ready to write my my script or my speech, so to speak, for TutorCon, which is coming up in October. If you're not familiar with TutorCon, this year is the second TutorCon. So last year was the first one. It's held in Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, my father had some health issues last year, and so I was unable to attend. This year, I was going to attend and speak on Thomas Seymour, and then COVID-19 struck, and we have to do it virtually this year. So I was about to start writing my script for my Thomas Seymour speech, and then I thought, hey, I want to talk to other people who might be interested in him and see what questions they have, because maybe that will help me write my speech, because I don't know where to go with it right now. Hi, Mr. Squidge. Hi, Leanne. I hope I pronounced your name right. Do you guys have any questions about Thomas Seymour? And while I wait for questions, I'm just going to kind of tell you a little bit about Thomas's background. So Thomas was the son of Sir John Seymour and Marjorie Wentworth. He was the fourth surviving son. Now, I say fourth because he had three elder brothers who survived infancy and at least lived until their teenage years, if not their very early 20s. The first son that was born to John and Marjorie was John Seymour, so named after his father. And John died young. There is a brass plate, now I'm going to forget, I think it's in Great Bedwin, of John Seymour, talking about his death. And then after that son was Edward Seymour, the one that everybody knows, the Duke of Somerset, the Lord Protector. In my world, the evil, the evil guy who had his brother killed. And then there is Henry Seymour. He went by Sir Henry Seymour. He didn't really get any titles or anything like that, but he did have some good places at court during his lifetime, but he preferred the country life. I wish there was more that we knew about Henry. I did write a post about him not that long ago on tutorsdynasty.com. I called it The Other Seymours, and it was The Other Seymours, Sir Henry Seymour. So if you want to learn more about him, please go check out my website, because you're going to find a lot more information on there about him, or at least what I could find. And then after Henry was Thomas. So Thomas was the youngest of four sons. He wasn't expected, to do much in his life because he was the fourth son. I've always suspected that he was probably promised to the church, but I haven't found anything in my research that corroborates that. So any questions so far? Anybody? Any questions? And we don't really know much about Thomas's childhood. It's likely he was educated by a priest at his home. I do know that Wolf Hall did have a chapel. And so it is likely that if he wasn't taught by his mother, he was taught by a priest. He definitely didn't have the education that his elder brother Edward did. But I always feel like Thomas had some street smarts. So 1530 is the first time that there's any record of him at court, when he is working under his cousin, Sir Francis Bryan. So he is delivering messages between Sir Francis Bryan and France to the king. And so he had at that time pretty close proximity to the king because he was delivering these messages. Here, first question. Mr. Squidge says, what are your thoughts on the alleged relationship with Elizabeth? This is always the question that everybody wants answered. That is all anybody knows about Thomas Seymour, and I hope someday we'll have other questions than that. However, I will do my best to answer this. The relationship between Thomas Seymour and Elizabeth is complicated. There is a lot that I have found in my research that leads me to believe that we're missing information. There was, at one point, some talk about marriage between the two. Now, what we have heard is that Cat Ashley, who was Elizabeth's governess, Cat Ashley was pushing to have Thomas Seymour marry Elizabeth. Now, this happened before he married Catherine Parr, and this happened after Catherine Parr. So Elizabeth was on the plate for a long time, and it seems that Cat Ashley was the driving force behind it. Now, how did we find out about this information? This is the interesting part to me, because in my research, I go back to as many contemporary documents as I can find. And in those documents, we have Cat Ashley's deposition from when Thomas Seymour was arrested. So it wasn't long after he was arrested and put in the tower that both Cat Ashley and Thomas Parry, both employees of Elizabeth, were arrested and placed in the tower, and they were interrogated, so to speak. They were questioned. The council was trying to figure out a way to make Thomas look guilty. And I say that honestly believing that a lot of the charges against him were trumped up, or they were created to make him look even worse and to make them feel better about having him in the tower. Cat Ashley, in her testimony, makes all of these claims about Thomas Seymour coming into Elizabeth's bedchamber, smacking her on the bottom, being inappropriate, wearing his nightshirt and slippers, and coming in inappropriate times. The only problem that I have with that statement is that it only comes from Cat Ashley's mouth. Nobody else has made that statement other than to repeat what Cat Ashley has said. I am very skeptical. There's probably a little bit of truth in it, because isn't that the saying? With every lie, there's a little hint of truth. There's probably a little bit of truth in it. However, I think a lot of it was exaggerated or created because she was terrified. I read a book once by G.W. Bernard, Professor G.W. Bernard, where he talks about Thomas Seymour and what happened. And he decided, on his own that he believes that Cat Ashley was under psychological torture while in the tower. Would that surprise you at all? Because honestly, it was only 3 years earlier that Anne Askew was the first woman executed. So Cat Ashley had to have been terrified for her life that there was a possibility. I'm sorry, let me go back. I just realized I made a mistake. Anne Askew was not the first one executed. She was the first woman tortured. So Cat Ashley had to have been thinking about this as she's being questioned in the tower, that there is this possibility that they're going to torture me if I don't give them the information that they want. And so I've always suspected that she made up some of it, or they fed her stuff and she just signed it at the end. Because when you look at the original documents, you see it handwritten. It's handwritten, her testimonies. And then at the bottom, it's signed by her. She did not handwrite those testimonies. The writing does not match up. So somebody wrote that for her. How did they get this information out of her? What was she thinking? It's also hard to know. The one thing we do know is that Cat Ashley did like Thomas Seymour. She liked him a lot. And that's why she had been fighting so much to have him marry Elizabeth. So the fact that the stories come out making it seem like he was molesting her or being inappropriate with her, I just really have a hard time wrapping my brain around that whole thing since she is the only one. Kat Ashley is the only one who said it. One of the things that I've discovered in my research is that Kat Ashley also changed her story. So there was a time when, I don't know if you guys remember or not, but the story about Elizabeth being caught in the gallery in an embrace with a man. And I believe, if I remember correctly, that was at Chelsea. It was either at Chelsea or Hanworth. And it was witnessed. And the first time it's witnessed, the first time, what was said, Kat Ashley said that the Queen witnessed Thomas Seymour and Elizabeth in an embrace. And it was shortly after that Elizabeth was sent away. Now, Elizabeth's coffer, Thomas Parry, said that Kat Ashley told him that it was Thomas Seymour who saw Elizabeth in the gallery in an embrace with a man. So, which was it? There's little things like that make me kind of think her testimony is not worthy. I suspect that I may find some more information on this, but most of it's going to kind of lean towards the fact that Kat Ashley was probably coerced. These are just my feelings as far as the research that I've done. And I'm sure it doesn't answer your question fully. Kat Ashley liked him. It boggles me that she would tell all these stories about these bad things that he did, because after Catherine Parr died, she was right back at it, trying to get Elizabeth and Thomas together, trying to convince Elizabeth that Thomas was a great match. And all along, of course, Thomas, I'm sure, was very interested in it, but he also understood that it was dangerous for him to pursue the king's sister and heir to the throne. He was quoted many times as saying, he didn't want to lose his head for a woman or over a marriage. He liked Elizabeth. I have no doubt that he liked her. I think they flirted. I think she had a crush on him. I'm sure he was attracted to her. She was young, she was intelligent, she was feisty. And I'm sure she was a lot like Catherine Parr at that point. So anyway, that was a long answer, but I really feel like Kat Ashley had a lot to do with that story, and I'm not so certain that it's all true. So thank you, Mr. Squidge, for asking that. I knew somebody was going to come out and ask that question. So does anybody else have any other questions that they would like to know about Thomas Seymour? And if you're interested in reading more, you can definitely find more online if you look. Ms. French Twist, Thomas Seymour was a social climber. Weren't they all? During that time at court, everybody was all about being ambitious and trying to get to the next level and to become wealthier and own more land. So he wasn't any different than any other Tudor courtier at that time. But for some reason, history makes both him, I would say, and his brother look like these bad guys who were just hungry for money and power, and they were the only ones like that. And I've always thought that statement is unfair to both of them. So yeah, they all were social climbers. I mean, it took Thomas much longer to get where he needed to get than it did his brother. But again, he was the fourth son. I mean, he was born probably about 1508. He didn't become a baron until 1547. So the poor guy was almost 40 by the time he finally saw some progress. Hi, Jody. Thanks for joining in. Do you guys have any other questions? Because this is fun. I'm having a good time talking with you so far. While I'm waiting, I did mention that the first time that Thomas comes into the records is in 1530 when he was serving for Sir Francis Bryan. That was a good plan for him to get to court. And when his sister became queen, of course, his star rose too. He became a gentleman of the Privy Chamber after his brother became Earl of Hertford. So that was a good step for him. And then he was close to the king every day. He had a really good relationship with Henry VIII. And you can see through all the grants and things that were given to him that Henry liked him. And he had a great relationship with Thomas Cromwell. I think During the dissolution, I think Thomas got like 40 pieces of property or leases or something like that, if I recall. So people liked him. He was well liked. Women liked him. It's just weird to me that history took the information that they were given after he was executed as fact. Nobody has really dug in and really looked at the facts and given him a fair trial. So that's one of the things that I hope to do with my book. Holly asks, was he working with his brother or were they separate, ambitious entities? That's a great question, Holly. And it's a tough one to answer because it does seem that prior to, I'm going to say 1547, after Henry VIII died, prior to 1547, I really feel like the Seymour brothers had a great relationship. There is a letter that I had found where Thomas wrote to his brother Edward, and I think Edward was in France or in Scotland or somewhere. Anyway, in the letter, he wrote basically that he had checked in on his sister, meaning Anne Seymour, Edward's wife, because if it had been their sister, then they would have been talking about somebody else. So he was checking in on Anne, making sure everything was okay, letting his brother know. I think they were a cohesive team at that time, as much as they could be. I really don't see the rivalry come in until after Henry VIII dies. And many of you know that I have my own suspicions on what happened. But really what I think happened was that Edward Seymour made a lot of promises to people right before Henry VIII died. He made a lot of promises asking people to support him in the protectorship, and in return, he would give them things. I think Edward made Thomas promises that he couldn't keep. And so to appease him, Edward made sure that Thomas became Lord High Admiral. Well, that caused problems because he had to take that title from John Dudley. So John Dudley, who later becomes the Duke of Northumberland, he has had the title of Lord High Admiral for many years. And it's a powerful title to have. And so to hand it over was one of those things where I'm sure he did it begrudgingly. Even though he was made Earl of Warwick at the time, I can't imagine he wanted to give up that title. But he did. He gave it up to Thomas. And I think Edward did that to appease Thomas, to make him feel better about the whole thing, because he was only made a baron, which I've always thought is ridiculous. You are the uncle of the king and you were only made a baron. I mean, it just seems like a slap in the face. So I don't, honestly, in my opinion, I don't blame Thomas for reacting that way. He felt like he had been wronged. And who knows, maybe prior to Henry's death, Edward had made him some great promises saying, I'm going to give you this, I'm going to give you this, just make sure that you vote my way. And then when it came time to vote for the council, everybody voted to have him as protector. At least I think everybody. I'd have to go back and check on that. And then later on, they come back and tell Thomas, after he is arrested, well, you agreed to your brother being Lord Protector, so why were you fighting against him? I went looking for this because I'm trying to find the document that these gentlemen of the council signed saying that they agreed to make Edward Seymour Lord Protector. I found, I believe, what is probably a copy of it. It's handwritten. It is from the 16th century, but there are no signatures on the document. So I have no evidence at this point that Thomas Seymour actually signed anything agreeing that his brother should be made Lord Protector. He just wanted it to be fair. He just wanted it to be like when Henry VI was in his minority. His uncles were able to hold the positions like Lord Protector, Governor of the King's Person, that kind of stuff. In this situation, Edward Seymour decided he wanted to keep it all for himself, when really he should have split it up. And had he split it up with his brother Thomas, I really don't think we would be talking about them the way that we are today. I think it would have been a whole different story. So, yeah, that was my long answer to your question, Holly. And Ms. French Twist wants to know, was Seymour handsome? He was definitely described as handsome. He was very good looking. The ladies liked him, and they always talk about how he had a magnificent voice. So I presume he was a singer. if they were going to say that about him. But he was tall. He was the good-looking brother. He dressed well. So yes, yeah, he was definitely good looking for the time, at least. What else do we got here? No more questions yet. So, oh, here we go. Holly, was Thomas involved with Mary at all? I assume you're talking about Princess Mary. Now, I know often we hear people talk about how Thomas tried to marry Princess Mary before Elizabeth. I get a little bit confused by this because I haven't found the documentation to prove this. So, all that I know that I found in my research is that when Thomas Seymour had secretly wed Catherine Parr, he knew he was in trouble for doing that because he needed to ask permission of the Lord Protector in order to marry the Dowager Queen. He didn't. He wed her secretly. And so both of them came up with this plan, both Thomas and Catherine Parr, they came up with this plan that they needed to get permission from the young king. They were both on good terms with young King Edward. And so they used him. Basically, was it right? No. But I do feel like they deserved to at least be given the opportunity to marry. What they did was Thomas Seymour had made friends with John Fowler, who was one of Edward's servants, close servants. And he had told John Fowler, hey, could you please ask the king who he thinks I should marry? I think it's time, or does he think it's time? He's 40. At this time, it's time to get married. He hasn't been married yet. So the king, Fowler approaches the king. The king doesn't seem too interested, but he says, well, I think my uncle should marry, definitely. And I think he should marry my Lady Anne of Cleves. And then he stops and he says, no, nay, I think he should wed my sister Mary to change her opinions. And so I think that's where it comes up because I haven't really found anything to point in the direction that he actually asked Mary to marry him. So that's my little confusion there, is that I have never found anything. And if you have something, please send it my way because I'm sure I've read it and just forgotten it. Sometimes that happens. After so many years of research and documents everywhere, it's easy to forget. But that is really the only time that I have seen mention in that Mary being brought up. And, of course, after that, Thomas Seymour was like, that's not the answer I wanted. So he tells Fowler, why don't you go back and ask the king how he would feel, about the Dowager Queen. And Fowler goes back and he's like, great, I think that's a great idea, And he gets a letter written to him and Catherine, and in the letter it states, congratulations on your marriage and whatnot. So anyway, he got the king's approval, and when the Lord Protector found out, of course, he wasn't very happy that Thomas and Catherine went behind his back to sneakily get approval from the king. So that caused some conflict as well. Didn't help. In the future, when Catherine Parr was trying to get her personal jewels back from the tower, when they were sneaky that way, I feel like after that, Edward Seymour didn't want to help his brother or his bride in any way. I think they were more of a threat. Thomas Seymour and Catherine Parr together were quite a power couple. If you think of it, you have the uncle of the king and the Dowager Queen. That's pretty big. Anne Seymour thought she was something, being the wife of the Lord Protector, but she wasn't a Dowager Queen. So Thomas and Catherine had power, and I feel like the council was also afraid of that power. But that's a whole nother story. So let's see if there's any other questions. Kelly, when did Thomas meet Catherine Parr? This is such a tough question to answer. We don't know the exact date. All we do know for certain is that prior to her marriage to Henry VIII, that they had considered marriage. And we don't know how they met. We don't know where they met. But in my research, I suspect that they met through Catherine's brother, William, because at the same time that Thomas was a gentleman of the Privy Chamber, William Parr was as well. So it's likely if in, I think it was February of 1542, maybe 43, when Catherine Parr and her husband, Lord Latimer, came to England or came to London, sorry, because he was sick and they came to London to get him better doctors. It's possible at that time somehow there was some social circles that they ended up being at the same time. And I'm sure Thomas wooed her and they ended up falling in love, or at least she fell in love, but it seems like it was on both sides. Unfortunately, it was short-lived. They wanted to get married, and then Henry VIII stepped into the picture, and Catherine chose to do her duty, as she said, and married the king. But if she had had her choice, she would have married Thomas then. So we know they knew each other back then. I can't imagine what it was like after she married Henry VIII and Thomas would come back to court, because he was away from court a lot at that time. I don't really think he was sent away. I think he was just working really hard. He was an ambassador to the Low Countries. He was off fighting wars for the king and leading troops and whatnot. So he was gone a lot. But I always wonder when he came back to court if they saw each other, or if there was that glimpse, they caught each other's eye in passing or something, or that part fascinates me. I want to know more about that, but we'll never know. I hope that answers your question. When did Thomas? Okay, so let's see. Laura said, did he have a child which didn't survive? The only child that we know so far that Thomas Seymour had was his daughter with Catherine Parr, Lady Mary Seymour. She's the only one. She lived till at least the age 2. And that was something, if you want to know more about that too, I wrote an article about it not that long ago called The Disappearance of Lady Mary Seymour. And I go into depth there in research, kind of following her through the time, seeing what happened. There's been some speculation that she lived into adulthood. I don't believe it. It's just family lore. I think people want to believe that she lived. And sometimes in family, stories get created or changed over time. It's like the telephone game, when you're in school and you play the telephone game and one person whispers in the ear. And by the time you get down to the last person, the story has changed. So I really don't think that she survived past the age of 2. Evidence suggests that she did not survive past the age of 2, which is sad. But on a happy note, I guess, at least all 3 of them hopefully were together after that. Let's see. Holly says, this isn't a question about Thomas, but could you tell us about some of the men close to Henry VIII, like Charles Brandon? Oh, Charles Brandon, I don't know enough about Charles Brandon to be able to talk about him. My focus has really been, I would say, on the Seymours or the 6 wives of Henry VIII. I think Charles Brandon was just lucky to be, the king's best friend, especially when he secretly married the king's sister. But some historians have said that they believe that King Henry knew that after King Louis died in France, that Charles and his sister were going to marry. So that's about all I can say there. I just feel like they really lucked out when it came to the marriage game. They just ended up having to pay a fine. Nobody got thrown in the tower. Nobody got arrested. But as we know, that wasn't always the case for everyone. So I guess Charles Brandon, he's an exception because he was so close to the king for so long and was willing to do what he had to do. It didn't mean he didn't get in trouble. Didn't mean he didn't get sent away from court at times. I think he called Anne Boleyn a name once, or said something about her, and Henry got mad and sent him away from court too. So he wasn't always on the best of terms. Oh, what was his real? Okay, Mr. Squidge again. You got a lot of questions. I love it. What was his relationship like with his sister Jane? Do you think he played a role in getting her close to Henry VIII? I wish there was more to show us exactly what his relationship was with Jane. I suspect it was a good relationship since they were so close in age. Jane was born right after Thomas. It is believed that they were only a year apart. So, look at your own family, look at your own relatives, and take that into account. Even in modern times, my younger brother is 2 years, younger than me. My older brother is 5 years. I am much closer with my younger brother than I am with my older brother because we grew up kind of at the same time. We got to experience the same things. Whereas I feel like Jane's relationship with Edward may not have been as strong because they were 8, 9 years apart instead. Um, I haven't found anything to directly point to either of the Seymour brothers being involved in her rise to become the next Queen of England. I'm sure there was some involvement there because that's just how it worked back then. How they went about it, that I couldn't tell you. Um, I don't know. I want to say I don't think, but I don't know if they coached her. I know Jane was more of a Catholic than a Protestant, so it's possible that on her own she decided to do this in revenge for his treatment of Catherine of Aragon, who she had served. Uh, so, yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one to answer. I'm sorry. I wish I could answer that for you a little bit better. You guys have any other questions? Oh, Holly wants to know if I can tell you a little bit more of Thomas's relationship with Cromwell. Um, Thomas Cromwell, of course, he held a lot of power during that time. Thomas was the uncle of the future king. Technically, he was still considered the brother-in-law to the king, even after his sister died. So he was practically family when it came to being part of that Tudor family. Thomas Cromwell did the king's bidding. We know that. One of the interesting things is that Cromwell's son Gregory was wed to Elizabeth Seymour. So she was younger than Jane. So it was Jane, then Elizabeth, and then Dorothy. So Elizabeth Seymour got married to Gregory Cromwell. This, at that time, I believe, was her second marriage. I think she was married 3 times in all. She gets married to Gregory Cromwell. Now here we have a family connection. The Cromwells and the Seymours now are joined together. So obviously, I'm really having a hard time today. Thomas Cromwell understood that aligning his family with the Seymour family was imperative because one day their nephew would become King of England. So it was definitely a power play there. I'm sure that helped Thomas's case when it came to receiving all the properties from the dissolution. But other than that, I really haven't delved in too far to learning about their relationship. I've really at this time kind of been focusing on the events of 1547 to 1549. But these are great questions because I'm having fun answering them and giving me ideas. Oh, here we go. What do we got next? Why was he sent to Belgium? If I remember correctly, he had to go there to try and recruit some troops. Don't mark my words on that. I did write an article once called Thomas the Diplomat. Check that out because I think that will answer all of your questions. Just go to tudorsdynasty.com and search for Thomas the Diplomat, or just go to Google and search Thomas the Diplomat, and it should pop up for you. And I hope that answers your question. Do we have any idea? Hi, Ryan. Do we have any idea of what Elizabeth thought of Thomas's execution and the events that led to it? There's been some things said that she said, but they've also been debunked. So I don't think we really knew what her feelings were. Thomas Parry made a comment once about how Elizabeth would blush whenever Thomas Seymour's name was brought up. She clearly liked him. There was something about him that she was attracted to. I don't doubt after he was executed that she was sad that he was gone, but she was smart. So she probably also recognized he made his own bed when it came to that. So that's really the execution and all that. We don't have much information as far as what Elizabeth thought. The interesting thing that I have read before is that some people have compared Robert Dudley to Thomas Seymour. that they were very much alike. And maybe that was one of the reasons why Robert Dudley was one of her favorites. So that's an interesting one. You can chew on that for a little bit. Let's see what else we got here. Holly says, is there any record of the relationship between the Boleyns and Seymours before Anne became queen? Again, this is one of those things I'm not as strong on. There would have been, Sir John Seymour, so Thomas's father, spent quite a bit of time at court. He, fought in battles with Henry VII when Henry VIII came to the throne in 1513. He went to France with him. So I have no doubt that they would have run into each other, Thomas Boleyn and Sir John Seymour. I just don't know about what their relationship would have been at that time. Sorry. Oh, it looks like I'm all caught up on these. If you guys have any more questions, let me know. In the meantime, please feel free to check out my website. Like I said, it's tutorsdynasty.com. I also have Thomas Seymour Society too, which I started a few years ago. Some of the articles on there are a little outdated because my research has been progressing so much. I look at it now and I go, oh, that's not true. So some of it might be outdated, but I did my best with the evidence that I had at the time when I wrote it. So a lot of this I'm going to save for my book, the biography of Thomas Seymour. It's not the title yet. I'm working on it, but I've been researching for the last 4 years and working on this book. And I want people to see a different side of him and to learn a different story and to see that he was unfairly executed, just as Anne Boleyn was. I don't see much of a difference between the two of them. We look at the 33 charges that were against Thomas Seymour, and I go through them one by one. And some of them seem like they're duplicated. So, just to make it look like there's more, to make him look more guilty. Now, don't get me wrong. He was guilty of some things. He was. After Catherine Parr died, he kind of went off the rails. So I feel like she was his moral compass. Together, they were strong. She kind of helped keep him in line. And I think he helped keep her in line too, because she seemed to have a little bit of a temper. When she got mad at his brother and said she could have spit at him, she called his wife, Anne Seymour, that hell. There was no love lost. She had a temper. Thomas had a temper, but together they were able to control him a little bit better. But when she died, I feel like he was so crushed and he just went off the deep end. At that point, he was like, what do I have to lose? I'm just going to go for it. So one of the things I've always found intriguing was, maybe he was doing it for his nephew. We see all the things where Edward was talking about how he hated his uncle Somerset and how he didn't let him do anything. He didn't give him money and all of these things. And is it possible that he asked Thomas to help him to get him out of there? That's something that I've been looking into a little bit more. Is it possible that the king was actually the one who instigated everything that ended in Thomas's execution, or that Thomas interpreted it incorrectly and took it that way? But he didn't go to Hampton Court to kill the king that night. I don't believe he killed the king's dog. And that's something that I'm going to talk about in my TutorCon speech too. So if you didn't catch that at the beginning, the first weekend in October, I want to say it's the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Let me look real quick. Here's October. Yep. 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So the 2nd is when TutorCon begins. There are digital tickets available. I think they're $29.95. And on the 3rd is when I speak. So I'll be speaking on the 3rd at noon Central Time. And then at the end of the day, I think it was going to be about 5 o'clock or so. Janet Wortman and I, who Janet has written about Path to Somerset, Jane the Queen, she has also reached the Seymours. We have differing opinions on the Seymour brothers. So at the end of that day, we are going to discuss and debate the Seymour brothers a little bit. I think it's going to be a lot of fun between the two of us. So be sure, check out TutorCon. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to talk about Thomas some more. What else do we got here before I get going? What was Lady Seymour like? Do you know? I'd like to see something. Oops, I missed some here. Let me go back. How can you? Oh, I can't tell you too much about Anne Seymour, or Anne Stanhope, I should say. I don't like her. I don't think she was very nice. I think if anybody was a social climber, she was behind the scenes with her husband. I've written something about her too, and I usually get a little flack for it, but she is the one person in Tudor history who I look at and I go, I don't know if she has any redeeming qualities, because she was pretty mean. And let's see, Leanne says, I am watching the miniseries Wolf Hall and wonder if you've seen it and what you think about the portrayal of Anne Boleyn. Okay, I love that miniseries, okay? I haven't read the books. I'm embarrassed to say I haven't read any of Hilary Mantel's books. But I did watch the series. I loved the series. I loved Mark Rylance's portrayal of Thomas Cromwell. Of course, it's a more romanticized, softer look at Thomas Cromwell in that series. So I enjoyed seeing that side of him. As far as Anne Boleyn goes, I actually kind of liked it. I liked that she had the French accent. I liked that she was different than what we normally see. So it doesn't necessarily mean that's how she was. I just feel like if we take all the portrayals and we put them all together, she was a combination of all of them. That she had the French accent. We know she did when she came back from court. I don't know how long she held on to it, but I loved that they did the French accent with her. So that was a lot of fun. I didn't mind the portrayal. I love Claire Foy. So I thought she did a great job. I did not like Damian Lewis as Henry VIII. I prefer Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, even though he's not tall enough. He doesn't have the red hair. I feel like he really encompassed Henry VIII when he played that role. I felt like he did the best job of anybody that I have seen thus far. And a lot of people liked Keith Mitchell too, and I thought he was all right. So, yeah, that's all I got on that. What else do we got here? Is there a reason why Henry VIII? Okay, Holly, didn't arrange a marriage to Mary to be married. She was already old by Tudor standard. Yeah, okay. So this one, I actually would prefer to have somebody else answer this one, because I interviewed Dr. Estelle Perronc, and I think she's a doctor. I don't remember now. Estelle Perronc. She specializes in Queen Elizabeth, and she answered this question for me one time on my podcast. So I highly recommend you go back through my videos and find the one. There's a portrait of Elizabeth on the side, and it's with Estelle Perronc. She talks about this. I think it'll give you all the answers that you need. You'll really like them. Yep. Ms. French Twist. A she-wolf. I don't like that term, but I think she was a she-wolf. Hi, Tiffany Strangebird. Is there any other questions before I let you go? I got to get back to writing my speech. We've been doing this for a while now, so I'm surprised. I guess I can write a 20-minute speech, no problem. I just finished creating the feature image for Monday's new episode. So the podcast is all edited. It's all ready to go. I've already had one person listen to it and see what they think with the new format. And so Monday, keep a lookout for that to drop. I'm going to get that going up about 6 a.m. Central Time. So you should see it hopefully come up a few hours after that here, because I am not going to be up at 6 a.m. All right, guys, if you don't have any other questions, I'm going to get back to writing my script. But otherwise, thank you. Oh, goodness, Holly, what would be a good first book to read about Tudor history? Good first book. You know what? The funny thing is, one of the first books I read wasn't nonfiction. It was the autobiography of Henry VIII by Margaret George. I'd start there. If you're looking for nonfiction, Mm, that's really tough. I guess it depends on if you just want the tutors in general, or if there's certain segment of the tutors or a certain person that you want to learn about. That'll help a little bit more because there's a few books out there that are just about the tutors in general. I know Leanda Delisle has a book called Tutors. um, there's another one I think by John Guy. There's a lot of them out there, but personally, I had fun starting with the autobiography of Margaret George, who, by the way, I got to interview on the podcast too, which was a lot of fun. And she actually doesn't even live that far from me, so that was definitely a fun experience. All right, so you guys, I hope you're all already subscribed to my channel. If you're not, please make sure that you subscribe and tell all your friends. And I'm really hoping to get the word out this season about the podcast. I'm really trying to grow it. I'm hoping this new format, everybody loves it. I was hoping it wasn't going to be as much work and time consuming as how I had done it previously, but it turns out I gave myself more work. But I see it as advancement. So the cool thing about this season is I hope I'm giving everybody what they want, because the people who watch the early episodes of the podcast, listened, I say watched because we're on YouTube. Those who listen to the early episodes, the ones where I just talked about one specific person, where I talked about Catherine Howard or Jane Seymour, Anne Boleyn, or Henry VIII, whatever it was, I would spend a week and a half researching. I would spend a half a week writing, and then I would record and edit and all of that. It got to be too much time, and I was working full time. There was no way I could continue at that point. And that was when I switched to doing interviews. So I switched to the interview format because then all I have to do is research a specific subject that the interviewer is going to answer questions on. And that was much easier for me to just come up with questions for them. Now, this season, I am doing the first segment is an interview with an author or historian. So on Monday, you're going to hear all about Catherine Howard and the Tudors from Alison Weir. Very excited to have her on the opening episode of the season. And then the next segment after the interview is called Ask the Expert. So every podcast, I'm going to have a new expert on who's going to answer your questions. Not mine, your questions about a specific subject. So when you see tweets go out where I'm asking for questions, or you see me on Facebook asking for questions, or Instagram, please participate, because I'm going to read your question to this historian or author. I'm going to tell them your name. I'm going to tell them where you live. So, for example, you're going to say something like, Michelle from Germany wants to know. You don't have to be specific. I don't want to invade your privacy. But I think it would be a lot of fun for these historians and authors to kind of see where people are coming from, these people who are familiar with their subjects. So I would love it if you guys start participating and Ask the Expert. So on Monday's episode, the Ask the Expert segment is with Matthew Lewis. So everybody loves Matthew Lewis. I ask your questions about Richard III and the Princes in the Tower to Matthew. So we've already done that. Don't send me your questions now. It's already been recorded. But when you see me post that stuff, please, please, please send in your questions, because I really need your feedback. And I think it's a lot of fun for you to be able to interact with these historians and ask them the questions that you've always been curious about. And then after that segment, there's one more, and that's where I do a brief history. So this is to bring back the original style that I used to do, where I just talk about a subject or a person or whatever it may be. So you're going to get an interview, you're going to get a question and answer, and you're going to get a story. So I'm hoping that you love the new formats and that you really enjoy it. And I so much look forward to your feedback on it, because it's for you. I do this for you and for all the patrons, because I promise you that without patrons supporting me, I wouldn't be able to do this. I wouldn't be able to afford the things that you need to be able to do a podcast. There's so many hidden costs that I think people don't realize. So I appreciate all my patron support, because without them, I wouldn't be able to do this. And in return, I like to give patrons gifts or prizes, so to speak. So every month I do a patron giveaway. So like this month, the month of September, anybody who's a patron this month gets put into a drawing to win this amazing Henry VIII miniature sculpture. And I posted it on social media. So if you're interested, go check it out. It's the cutest little, it's one of a kind, but it's about, I don't know, like 6 inches tall and a few inches wide. Handmade. It is amazing. And it was done by one of my artist friends locally. And so that's one of the things that I'm giving away in September. But I also do things like free access to the tutor course. So we kind of just wrapped up the tutor course 2020 that I created along with all my historian friends. We wrapped it up. There's still people finishing the process, but once all of the registrants are done, once my time frame has ended, then it's going to be only for patrons. So only patrons will be able to access the tutor course at a specific point that's coming up here in the future. And then next year, I've already decided I'm going to do another one. So we'll have a tutor course 2021. That one might only be available to patrons. So that's my way of saying thank you. Thank you for your support. Here's something that I can give you in return that other people aren't getting. So I hope you understand that. Another thing that I'm doing this season is exclusive content from the podcast. So there's going to be some episodes where I don't give you all of the information. So look for that in the episode on Monday, just to make it a little bit more fun, a little bit more behind the scenes. All right, guys. Well, it doesn't look like I have any more questions. Thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited to see that so many people turned out. I haven't been this lucky before. So thank you so much for joining me. And make sure you subscribe, become a patron if you like on Patreon, or, I'll see you around.